Next week, the Tories will present perhaps their final budget. It's their last pitch to voters before the next election, so we might expect tax cuts. And they've also floated scrapping the non-dom tax status for super rich foreigners. And on BBC Question Time, Labour's David Lammy gave his predictions.
In the run-up to a budget, what the Tories will do is fly a kite about a whole range of policies, try and excite their base to see if something will go down. None of us know what's in the budget until we get there. But we do know that there's been a debate in the Conservative Party about tax cuts, and that debate has now rumbled on for several years. At the same time, people are really feeling the squeeze. But the only way out of this is growth in our economy, and we have been in recession under them. So this is on them, and what the British people now need, frankly, is a general election. We need...
So should I assume then that we wouldn't be seeing tax cuts under a Labour government should you get in?
I've been around a long enough time to tell you that I'm not here as the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer to start predicting what is in... Well, I'd love to... Caroline, are you really going to start telling us what your plan is on the budget?
I can certainly tell you, David, that the Green Party would not be proposing tax cuts at a time when public services are absolutely decimated, when hospitals have huge waiting lists, when schools are literally crumbling, when universities can't cope because they can't manage to manage their books. I can absolutely tell you that the Green Party would be prioritising investment in vastly needed public services, not cutting taxes.
And are you going to suggest where the money's going to come from to do that?
I would love to, David. I would love to challenge you on why the Labour Party has moved away from a wealth tax. A wealth tax is one of the things that in many other countries they pursue that and they look at the tax burden. Well, I shouldn't call it a burden. It's the responsibility of paying tax. And they recognise that some of the richest people in our society do not pay a proportionate amount of tax relative to the amount of money that they have, not just in their income, but in terms of their assets. So why is the discussion of a wealth tax such a taboo in this country? They have a wealth tax in Switzerland, in Norway, and lots of other countries where it's not brought the sky falling down. We should have a proper discussion about where the money comes from to invest. And one of the ways it can come from is from people who have more and earn more.
It's a very good answer. It's a very patronising question as well. How are you going to pay for it? You know, as if sort of like there's the idea of taxing the rich is just, you know, beyond the comprehension of Caroline Lucas. It's like, well, how will we pay for it? We'll do a wealth tax. It's like, oh. Like he asked the question as if he sort of assumed there would be no answer to it. Aaron, what did you make of that exchange?
I thought it was completely bizarre, not least because he's saying, how would you pay for it? You know, Keir Starmer in 2020 was saying how he'd pay for it. You know, it's as if, you know, you're trying to defy the laws of gravity. How would you raise the tax? We tax in this country capital less than work. We tax wealth less than work. If you buy a house and, you know, 2 years later it's gained £100,000 in value and you sell it, it's probably made, well, it's definitely made more than the average person would have earned working for those 2 years, and we're going to tax the capital gain on that property less than we're going to tax that person's wealth, than their work rather. Crazy, right? So the first thing you do, I think, is equalise capital gains and income tax, broadly speaking. I spoke about this, by the way, not so long ago in a TED Talk. And what was interesting for me, Michael, was speaking to very wealthy people. They were like, yeah, it is kind of crazy. It is kind of crazy because, of course, if you're very wealthy and you've got everything you want, and it's not being taxed, and you keep on getting richer and richer, what do you do with the money? Well, you've got nothing else to do. You know, you can only have so many houses, so many yachts, so many nice Brioni suits. You invest it in assets to make you more money. The assets invariably are a form of rent. Could be property. It could be investing in privatized healthcare or whatever. And that generates more and more revenues. You have more money. You invest in more assets. So it's like an Ouroboros, you know, the snake eating its own tail, which is almost a machine for income inequality, regional inequality, political volatility, low innovation, low productivity. So obvious. So what you need to do is, and a small c conservative position on this, Michael, by the way, is just to bump up capital gains by a couple of percent. Doesn't even need to be. I think this is a centre-right position. If you're just saying, well, look, we need to basically improve the public realm in this country like 20%. We need high-speed rail so people can go to work on time, so that businesses can flourish outside M25. We need to invest clearly in local government because we've cut their budgets by 50% since 2010. How are we going to do that? We'll probably, let's tax capital gains slightly more. That should be the centre-right position. But you've got a nominally Labour politician there sort of poo-pooing it as if it's saying that I want to resurrect the dead and have a Sunday roast with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This is a very reasonable policy that is being delegitimized by the Labour Party precisely because they're in hocks of very powerful interests who don't want them to do it. And I do not buy this idea that, if we increase capital gains, then actually that means we're going to lose our Tory switchers. Because I think, for instance, VAT is too high. I think we should have had a VAT cut in this country, like the Germans did, to deal with the cost of living crisis. I think many small businesses would have been saved. Many jobs would have been kept had we done that. And what I'd say is I want tax to go up in some places and down in some others. I don't think we should be taxing working people through consumption like we do. I do think we should be increasing the taxes on wealth for the very rich. And people then say, well, it's easy to talk about the very rich. Where are they? Where are they? It's just, this abstraction you're talking about. Last year, the managing director of Harrods said, the rich get richer in a recession. Recessions are good for the rich. Our sales and our revenues are doing phenomenally well. Until recently, the largest company by market capitalization, maybe it's gone back to that position actually, the largest company in Europe by market capitalization is not a big tech firm. It wasn't, even petrochemicals, right? It was LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, luxury goods. Very many wealthy people have lots of cash to spend on this stuff. We know that because it's literally one of the two biggest companies in Europe. So there is money out there. It can be taxed. And just as we saw the Overton window on political debate shift left over the last 5 to 10 years, really, Labour in government would seek to shift it right. They would seek to shift it right. This is not me disliking Labour. It's just a fact. You're seeing it here in real time. David Lammy is saying, we can't increase any taxes on the rich. And by the way, I think just to keep this ship afloat, just to stay where we are, you're going to have to increase taxes because of an aging population, because of crises in the higher education sector, and because of local government bailouts. My God, Michael, look at Birmingham. They're going to have to sell £1 billion worth of assets. They're going to have to lay off 600 people. They're going to have to increase council tax by 21%. All these things because of this massive payout they're having to make, because of historical injustice with regards to various parts of their employees. Dozens of other councils could be in the same situation. So the idea that, we can't have tax rises. We're having tax rises. A 21% council tax rise is a tax rise. And it's just a complete, lack of responsibility to sort of have this debate and say, well, we'd like to cut taxes. It's one thing to say, in an economic downturn, we don't want to increase taxes. I wouldn't agree with that entirely. Like I say, I think capital gains, you could do that. It's one thing to say that. That's a Keynesian position, by the way. It's another thing to say we would look to we'd like to cut taxes. That is a deficit-funded tax cuts is a trust position. Lammy's not saying that, but he's one away from, George W. Bush or Liz Truss, deficit-funded tax cuts. That's not a left-wing position. And it's basically there's no basically about it. It is buying into austerity, because the key presumption here, which nobody talks about really, is that the growth on which Blairism was built was extraordinary. It was a historical one-off for a bunch of reasons which we can't go into today, and it's not going to be repeated. We have to build millions of homes. We have to build a national care service. You might say we have to increase military spending. I wouldn't really agree with that, given how bad procurement is. We've got to transition our energy systems, and we've got to bail out, 101 sectors. This is going to cost a lot of money. Finally, Angela Rayner was at a conference today about the future of the North. Labour won't even commit to finishing HS2, Michael. They could say, it'll be on ice. We want to cut costs, but we absolutely want high-speed rail to go from Manchester to Birmingham, from Birmingham to Leeds, maybe even to Bradford. They could say that. They don't, because what they want, what their politics consist in, is getting their feet under the table, saying we're nice, virtuous, good people, and we're 0.5% or 0.5 degrees further left than the Tories. Those are their political commitments. And if you think otherwise, I'm afraid you're going to be very badly disappointed, because at least with Tony Blair, he had Gordon Brown, he had Robin Cook, he had John Prescott, he had Mo Mowlam, he had really big left-wing figures in his shadow cabinet. Labour, you could say maybe Angela Rayner. That's it. It certainly doesn't look good.